In the following slides, we're going to have a look at two models of reflection. These models may be useful for you as they may provide a structure for you to start developing your own reflective thinking and therefore developing or structuring your reflective writing. The first model that we're going to look at is based on Kolb 1984, and the second one is based on Gibbs 1988. Let's have a look at Kolb's modular reflection. This model shows a learning cycle. It has 4 stages. The first stage is called concrete experience. In here, we may want to answer questions such as what happened, when, where, and who was involved. Although this is a very descriptive level of our experience, as we move to the second, third, and fourth stage, we become more reflective and critical. For instance, as we move to the second stage called reflective observation, we start questioning that experience. So we may want to answer questions such as what did I experience? How did I feel? What did I do? Why did I do it? Were there any consequences? The third stage of this learning cycle or reflective cycle is called abstract conceptualization. In here, we may want to start establishing connections between a theory in order to interpret that experience that we live. So questions such as why did this happen are common to answer. Remember that at this point we're trying to analyze one experience in order to interpret it in light of a framework. Now, our fourth stage of this learning cycle is called active experimentation. In here, we may want to answer questions such as what will I do next? Or what will I do in the future? This stage involves planning and trying out what our new learning might be in order to improve our subsequent experiences. Okay, let's have a look at our second model of reflection. You may find similarities or differences between the first model and this one. This reflective model is based on the ideas of Gibbs. Gibbs started his reflective cycle by the stage called description. Once again, in this stage, very similar to Kolb's model, we may want to answer the question what happened, who was involved, what, where, and when. The second stage, called feelings, involves engaging in answering the question what were we feeling at the time. Also, answering the question what were we thinking at the time can be very valid. The third stage is called evaluation. In here, we may want to answer the question or questions, what was bad about this experience and what was good about this experience. As we move to the fourth stage called analysis, we may want to answer the question, what sense can we make of the event in relation to any specific framework or theory. Then, as we move to developing our conclusion, we may want to answer the question, what else could we have done? And finally, we move to our last stage called action plan. In here, we may want to answer the question, what might we do to improve if a similar event happens again? So, were you able to identify similarities and differences between these two models? Excellent. Let's continue. One thing that we can say about these two reflective cycles is that they help us to move from being descriptive to becoming more reflective in our writing. For instance, I could identify 3 stages in these two reflective cycles. There was one stage that was very descriptive in nature, because we were answering questions such as what, when, who, and where. However, as we move towards the following stages of those reflective cycles, we can become more analytical. We become more analytical as we are answering the questions why and how in relation to theory or specific frameworks. For instance, the question how helps us to consider how something operates or works. It helps us to become more interpretive from our experience. Similarly, the question why helps us to find reasons, logical explanations, or causes. It helps us to think about all the possible questions, but also all the possible answers in relation to the question why. Obviously, the answers will come over time from our reading and our study. Now, as we move toward the final stages of those reflective cycles, we can see that we are answering the questions, so what? What's next? What if? All these questions help us to consider possible implications as well as to forecast our own actions. They help us to justify our positions and probably develop some recommendations that we can make. And all these lead us to more value for the outcome of our assignment. Based on our previous models of reflection, I present now a possible structure for your reflective writing. In here, you can divide your writing in 3 parts: introduction, body, and conclusion. In the introduction, you may want to incorporate the description of your experienced event. In the body or the middle of your writing, you may want to provide an interpretation. You may want to answer questions such as what is interesting about this event, how it can be explained in relation to theory, are there any limitations of the theory that may impact your understanding and interpretation of the event, and other questions that you may find useful, such as those questions that help you analyze and interpret the situation. Now, for your conclusion or outcome, you may want to answer questions such as what do you learn from this, and what does this new learning mean for you in the future? Another possible structure for your reflective writing based on the previous models of reflection is the following one. You may want to have a section which reports on our experience first. Then, you may want to have another section which reports on the theory of your focus or on the theories of your focus. You may want to add a third section which aims to bring both the experience and the theory together. This is where your analytical and interpretative skills come through. Finally, you may want to have a conclusion. Please be aware that these are just examples of ways to structure your reflective writing, so it is important that you follow any guidelines given by the lecturer or the course. Go back and read your task instructions. Finally, try to bear in mind the following points. Number 1. Reflection is an exploration and an explanation of events, not just a description of them. Number 2. Reflective writing often involves revealing anxieties, errors, and weaknesses, as well as strengths and successes. This is fine. In fact, it's often essential, as long as you show some understanding of possible causes, linking them to theory, and explain how you plan to improve. Number 3. It is normally necessary to select just the most significant parts of the event or idea in which you are reflecting. If you try to tell the whole story, you're likely to set up your words on description rather than interpretation. And finally, number 4, it is often useful to reflect forward to the future and to consider the limitations of the theories that you're using to understand your experiences.